Hey everyone, welcome back to Coding for Kids. Today, we're going to go over how to make a simple piano game. So basically what this game is about is you can click the letters A, B, C, D, E, or you could go to the next page and click F, G, H, I, J, and then the cat is going to go over to that key and play it. So here's a demonstration. So I can click A on my keyboard, and the cat is going to go over to A and plays it. So it makes a sound, but I don't think you guys can hear it because I'm screen recording. Anyways, it does that for all the other keys too. And then I can show it to you guys on the other side too. Okay, so a few important things to notice. We have keys, which are each a sprite individually, and we have the cat who's playing it. And we also have two backdrops because one hosts the A, B, C, D, and E keys, and the other hosts the F, G, H, I, J keys. So since each key is pretty similar, I'm just going to be showing you guys how to code 3 of the keys on each screen, and then if you guys want, you can add them in later. So let's get started. So first things first, we have to make a new project, so hit create, and we always have to rename our project to something that we can understand in the future. So I'm going to name this as piano game. So first, let's make all of our sprites. Personally, I don't like the cat sprite, so I'm going to pick a new sprite. So I'm just going to delete that sprite and then pick a new sprite. And I like Champ99, so I'm going to pick him to be my sprite. And since he's really big, I'm just going to make him really small. So like 50% maybe. Nah, it's still too big. So I'll make him 40% and then drag him to the bottom right here. Next, we have to make all of our piano keys. So the way we do that is we just hit choose a sprite, and then instead of clicking choose a sprite, we have to hit paint a sprite. So once you do that, you can use the paint tool to paint all of the sprites. So this is what it would look like. You'd have to choose the rectangle tool and then just draw a rectangle. And then using the type tool, you can type in the letter. Oh, it's the same color. So I'm going to type it in black. So let's type this, let's say A. And yeah, let's just make this a little bigger and drop it there. Okay. I'm also going to make the rectangle a little smaller. Then I'll move the A to the middle of it. Okay, that's going to be my first key. Now I have to make the B, C, D, E, F keys. So I'm going to hit paint a sprite again, and then this will make a new sprite. So this time I'm going to pick a different color. So we could do green this time, and then choose the rectangle. Oh, we need the outline present. And then we made it 4 pixels in the last one. So we can just delete this. Okay, let's draw a new rectangle. And this is what that would look like. So I'm just going to try to place it on the sprite itself, and then I'm going to try to make their dimensions pretty much the same so that it looks neat. Okay, that's pretty close. So once again, using the type tool, I'm just going to type in a letter B, and I have to use black so that we can see it. Just like that. And then I'm going to make this a little bigger. Okay, so that's how you make the B key. So now that you guys understand how to make sprites, just go ahead and make sprites for C, D, E, and F. And yeah, I'll come back to you guys once you do that. Okay guys, at this point, I have all my sprites made. So this is what they look like. That's the F, that's the E, the D, the C, B, and the A. So let me just organize these so that they look neat. Okay, those are all of our keys. So I'm going to go ahead and rename all of the keys so that are all of the sprites so that we can easily refer to them in the future. So I'm going to rename Champ99 to player because he's the one who's playing the piano. I'm going to rename this to A key, this to B key, and I'm just going to go through and do that. And finally, F key, just like that. Okay, now we have to make two backdrops because remember how we had one backdrop for the first set of keys and then another backdrop for the second set of keys. So the way I would do that is I would go into paint a backdrop. And I don't have to paint anything because I just want it to be a white background, but you could see that basically makes two backdrops. So now we have two backdrops, and you can even see that here. So we can just leave their names to be backdrop 1 and backdrop 2. All right. So first, let's go into our player and code this dude. So basically, when the flag is clicked, we want the player to set the backdrop to 1, or set the backdrop to the first backdrop. So we're going to keep track of the backdrops by using a variable. So let's go into variables and create a backdrop variable. Backdrop. Okay, and then here we're going to set the backdrop to 1. This isn't actually going to set the actual backdrop to 1, it's just going to set the variable to 1. And you guys will see why I'm doing that soon. Then we always want the player to always go on top of the keys, not below them. Well, you can't really see that now, but we don't want that to happen. We want this to happen. So I'm going to go back into player, and every time the flag is clicked, we want him to go to the front layer. So it's going to say go to front layer right here. And then finally, I want to set his starting position. So I want about this to be a starting position like we had the cat. So the coordinates are 7, negative 107. So, oh, they're already filled in for me. So I can just put this here. And I feel like 1 second's too long, so I'm going to change this to 0.5 seconds. Okay. Now, every time the A key is pressed, we want the player to go to the A key and then go back down. So that means that we have to go into events and do when dash key is pressed. We're going to change the key to A so that it detects it's going to run whatever code we put under this when the A key on our keyboard is pressed. And we're actually going to put this in an if statement because we only want the A key to work when the backdrop is the first backdrop. Because remember when we go into the second backdrop, only the D, E, and F keys are supposed to work. The A, B, C, and keys shouldn't work. So we're going to use an operator and change the 50 to a 1 and use backdrop. So basically, if backdrop equals 1, we want the thing, or we want the player to glide. I'll make this to 0.5 seconds and glide to the A key. And then once they do that, we want the player to come back to his original position, which is the bottom right here. So I can just duplicate this thing, this block, and then put it there. And yep, okay. Now we're going to do the same for the B key. So we can just duplicate this and then change this to B because we're doing the same thing, and then duplicate this and change this to C. So this is what that would look like. Okay, so this is what's happening here. The guy is moving to the A key and moving back so fast that we can't even see it happening. So that's why we need to do, hold on. No, we're saying glide. So actually that's not what's happening. Okay guys, the reason it wasn't working was because we never actually initialized the backdrop variable to 1. So we actually have to click the green flag first, and then it's going to be initialized to 1. And now it should work. Yeah. And right here, we need to change this to B key and then this to C key. So it works now. All right. We're going to do the same thing to the D, E, and F key, but we have to change the backdrop equals part to backdrop equals 2. So we're just going to duplicate these. Actually, we can probably duplicate, yeah, we can just duplicate the entire thing. Okay, and then this is going to be D, E, and F. Okay, this is like the exact opposite of what we want to happen here. We don't want these to work when the backdrop equals 1. We only want them to work when the backdrop equals 2 because we only want them to work on the second backdrop. So I'm just going to change all of these to 2 and change this to the D key, the E key, and the F key. Okay, so now the D, E, and F keys shouldn't work when I click the D, E, and F on my keyboard. And yeah, they're not working because the backdrop variable isn't 2. So now we're going to go into our actual keys and program those. So let's go to the A key first, and we want the A key to show when the flag is clicked. So let's go into events, and then when flag is clicked, we want to say show. And then we want to do an event block. So when A is pressed, and then we will only want the code in here to work when the backdrop equals 1. So we're going to use an if statement, the same if statement here, and then we're going to do if backdrop equals 1. Then variables, and then I can drag the backdrop. So if backdrop equals 1, we're going to first set the size to 80%. So the reason I'm doing this is because every time the player or champ99 goes up to the key, I want it to look like he actually presses down on the key. So the way I'm going to produce that illusion is by making the key smaller and then bigger so that it looks like it's been pressed. So I can do 80% first, and then I'm going to wait for half a second, so 0.5, and then I'm going to go into the sound part and then do pop sound. So play the pop sound, and then I want to set its size back to 100%. So let's see if that works. We're going to have to click the green flag to initialize the backdrop variable to 1, and then, yep, that works. So you can see the key getting smaller and then larger after a half second. So we can now use the same structure in our B, C, D, E, and F keys. But before we do that, we have to do one other thing. Every time the backdrop switches to the second backdrop, the backdrop with the D, E, and F keys, we want this to hide because obviously we don't want it to show. So the way I'm going to do that is by going into events again and then do when backdrop switches to backdrop 2, we want it to hide. And if the user ever decides to switch back to backdrop 1, we want it to show. So we're also just going to add that here. So, and then backdrop 1, and then we want it to show. Okay, we're going to do pretty much the same thing for the B and C keys. So let me show you guys another way to copy over code. Instead of doing it this way where you duplicate it and then you drag it into the B and then you go in here and find it, you can actually use what's called the backpack, and it's right here. So you can drag the backpack up, and it says that it's empty, so we can just drag this and drop this here. And then now it's right there. So we don't need this anymore. And then we can go into B, and then we can just drag this and put it back here. So that's just another way to copy code. So the backpack holds the code that you put in it, and then you can go over to different sprites or backdrops and put the code there. So let's just keep that there for now. So we want this to do when B key is pressed and the backdrop is 1, which is already programmed for us. And then we want to do the same thing we did for A, where we want to say when the flag is clicked, we want it to show. I'm going to close my backpack because it's kind of in the way. And then go into events, and then when backdrop switches to backdrop 1 and backdrop 2, we want it to show and hide. So when it's on backdrop 1, we want it to show, but when it's on backdrop 2, we want it to hide. Same exact thing for C. So instead of copying the code from B again, I can just go into my backpack and then drag this code out here. So we want this code to happen when the C key is pressed. So that's what that would look like. And then we can keep the rest of the thing the same. And then go into events. When flag is clicked, we want the block to show. But then when the backdrop changes, we want it to hide. So when backdrop switches to backdrop 1, we still want it to show. But when it switches to backdrop 2, we want it to hide. So just like that. Okay? All right. So let's just test our code and see how it works. So first we have to initialize the backdrop variable, so it's 1, and then A works, B works, and C works. And they continue to work. So that means what we've done so far is correct. Okay guys, before we do the next thing, we're going to go back into our player sprite, and whenever the flag is clicked, we want to first set the backdrop to backdrop 1. So set backdrop to backdrop 1. Okay, now we're ready to code the other blocks, but before we do that, we have to make sure that the backdrop switches. So the way we're going to control the backdrop switch is by using arrow keys. So what I mean by arrow keys is you can go into choose a sprite and then you can probably type in arrow. Yep, it's right there. So just click on that, and then we're going to name this next because this makes the backdrop go to the next backdrop. And we're going to add another sprite. It's going to be the arrow again, but we're going to go into its costumes and change it to the left arrow. And then we're going to name this back because when this arrow is clicked, we want it to go back. So I'm just going to drop these in the bottom right here. Okay, so now let's just code these first. So when the next arrow is clicked, so I can just go into events, and when this sprite is clicked, we want to first set its size to 25% so that it looks like it's been pressed. And then wait half a second, right here, wait 0.5 seconds, and then set its size back to 100%. So this just makes it look like it's been pressed. When this happens, we want to switch the backdrop to backdrop 2. And when we do that, we have to remember to change the backdrop variable. So go into variables and then set backdrop to 2. And once it goes to backdrop 2, we don't need the next arrow because we only have 2 backdrops. So we can just hide it then. So looks and then hide. But when it switches to backdrop 1, we want it to show so that we can go to the next backdrop, which is backdrop 2. And then we always want this to start off showing. So we're going to go into events, and then when green flag clicked, we want it to show. Whoops, right there. Okay, let's code the back arrow now. So similar process, I'm going to copy this code. I can probably just Control C and then Control V right there. So I'm keeping this, I can't talk. I'm making this the same code because the process of getting smaller and then getting bigger is the same. But here, instead of saying switch set backdrop to 2, we're going to change this to 1 because when it goes back, the backdrop goes to 1. So that's why we want to set the backdrop variable to 1. Okay, and then we want to go into events, and then when backdrop switches to backdrop 2, we want it to show because if we want to go back to the backdrop, we need the back arrow. So that's why if it's on the backdrop 2, we want it to show. So go into looks and then show. And then we always want this arrow to start off hiding. So we're going to go into events. When green flag is clicked, we want it to hide. Just like that. Okay, so now let's just try our code. So as you can see, the back arrow immediately disappeared when I clicked the green flag. So A works, B works, C works. And then now let's switch the backdrop to backdrop 2. And then A, B, C disappeared because they're no longer supposed to show up. So I'm just going to drag these up here, D, E, and F. And then let's code these now. Okay. So let's go into events, and then when the F key is pressed, E, F right here, and if backdrop equals 2, so control if backdrop equals 2, so we have to use the backdrop variable. So just drop that in. We want to set its size to 80% because we want to make it look like it's been clicked again, right? So 80%, wait for a second, and then back to 100%. So let's go to the looks blocks and set size to 80%. Wait half a second. This is like the same exact code for all the other blocks, but I'm just redoing it so you guys can see how to do it. And then go into sound, and we want it to play the pop sound until done. And then we want to set its size back to 100%. So just wanted to point out something here. Scratch has a built-in sound library, so you can actually go through and pick a different sound if you really want to, but for the sake of simplicity, I'm just keeping it the pop sound. But if you really wanted to, you can actually record like the actual sound that a piano makes when the A key is pressed, and then you can upload it onto Scratch so that it's more authentic. But for now, we're going to make it pop. Okay, when the green flag is clicked, we always want this to start off hiding. So when green flag is clicked, we always want to start off hiding because this is one of those blocks that's supposed to be on the second backdrop. And when the game starts, it defaults to the first backdrop, so we don't want these to be showing. So go into looks and then hide. And then when backdrop switches to backdrop 2, we want it to show. Looks, show, but for some reason, if the player decides to switch back to backdrop 1, we want it to hide again. So just use this block. So that's that. Oh, I've been doing these in the I've been doing these in the E, so I actually have to change this to E instead of F. So let's just try it. Yeah, that works. Okay, now we just have to copy and paste this code into D and F. So I'm going to open up my backpack and I'm just going to delete this because I don't need this anymore. So I'm going to drop that in, I'm going to drop that in, I'm going to drop this in, and I'm going to drop this in. So let's go to D, and then we can just pull out all of these from our backpack. Whoa. Okay, something weird happened. Oh, never mind. They all stacked on top of each other, so that's why we couldn't see it. And then finally this. But since we're in the D key now, we want this to happen when the D key is pressed. Everything looks right, so just make sure everything looks right, and it does. So let's go over to F and then drag these blocks out. and right there. So, oh, they're all like stacked on top of each other. It's kind of weird, but. And then we want this code to execute when the F key is pressed. So let's try our game. So let's click the start button, and it defaulted to backdrop 1. So A works, B works, C works. Let's go over to backdrop 2. D works, E works, and F works. And the arrow keys also work because every time you click them, okay, so there's something wrong with that arrow key. So let's just check it out. So when this sprite is clicked, oh, here it is. We want to switch to backdrop 1. So that's where we messed up. So let's restart, and then let's check the arrow keys. So if we click that, that works. And then if we click this, it goes back. So as you can see, the arrow keys work now. So A, B, C, those work. And then D, E, and F. And that works. So this is basically how you make a simple piano. You could make this better by adding more backdrops and just more keys, and you could also make each key sound different, but that's all extra. This is just basic. So yeah, we hope you had fun making this game, and thanks for joining us. Bye guys.